Cool. So, Eve, welcome to the Nidus Anarchy series. I'm so stoked to have you on board. Finally, everyone that's been asking me, hey, Adam, where's Eve? Here you are.
You needed an answer. Here I am. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Cool. So thank you. Thank you for joining us on Friday the 13th. Obviously, this is a very fun day for everybody. So nothing will go wrong. This is going to be the most perfect podcast that we've ever done. I'm so excited. I have my lucky trophy here just to make sure everything stays good. So, I mean, your background is massively impressive. I mean, you started out, I mean, I don't even say started out because like the whole, like basically one of the founding of the XML spec in itself, and then going up through, like Forrester and then becoming the CTO of ForgeRock. I mean, that is no small feat by any stretch of imagination. Can you kind of walk us through your background history? I know it's a lot, but if you can try, it'd be appreciative.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started out, my first career was actually in technical documentation, which is why I knew about SGML, which was very new at the time. And I became a practitioner of designing SGML schemas, DTDs, document type definitions. And I got invited to the table where people wanted to do SGML on the web. And that became XML. That was work done at W3C. And that was really my first set of standards contribution experiences. And it was very formative. And XML turned out to be useful for, let's call it machine to machine interactions, in a way that SGML wasn't too friendly for. It was mostly for sort of write once, publish many. And so I got involved in a lot of conversations around, well, we need a new ML. Okay, back then it was markup language for different purposes. And one of the purposes that I was approached about when I was actually at Sun Microsystems was there's this new thing called web services. And we think it needs security. And we think we need an XML language for that. And SOAP wasn't even around yet. So that's kind of how I got onto the train of what became identity, what became SAML, security assertion markup language, and got involved in subsequent, I'll call them standard stacks, and kind of the beginning of the IAM industry, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, especially on that SAML side. I mean, that's absolutely the beginning. And XML, I mean, it's still used today everywhere. It is one of the basic languages that everyone knows. Like you have to know XML, and it's one of the easiest to understand too. It's like when I remember when the first time I saw XML, I was like, why didn't we have this forever ago? Like, this is so much easier. Now,
there were
the
people at the
style
time
sheet side of
complaining.
XML, I'm so happy with.
There's definitely people who don't like the syntax of XML. We're arguing for S expressions, and now we have JSON, and I get that it's a gray beard, but it is nothing deployed ever goes away, so it's definitely around in a lot of places.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so then, so from the XML side, it was cool. Actually, I went to the XML spec the other day, scrolled down, sure enough, there's your name.
Oh, yeah. There were only a dozen of us who started it. And we were sort of braving the winds of HTML, which at the time was sort of, SGML-ish, it sort of had a schema, but not really. And so we wanted to do the right thing and sort of unleash the ability for anybody to design their own data format. And that's what was really motivating for me.
Nice. So how did you go from working with Sun, then how'd you kind of get into the Forrester area, and what was kind of your role over there? How fun was that?
Yeah. I joined Forrester as, well, at the time, the junior IAM analyst in the security and risk team, working with my pal Andras Chair, who's still there, still awesome. And I was able to cover. We didn't have the term SIAM then, right? We would talk about customer focused IAM and its importance. Yeah. But cloud identity was relatively new, so I contributed to coverage of that. Strong authentication, which at the time, was pre-FIDO. It was, largely oath-based and lots of hard tokens that people didn't like. And also API security. And that was sort of nascent. So I was contributing with my colleagues sort of across the aisle in different disciplines, like around app dev, for example, and covering that sort of research. And ultimately, I decided, I wanted to go what Forrester calls go back into industry, go and make things. And I was covering ForgeRock. I knew a lot of the ForgeRockers. I was from Sun. A lot of them were from Sun, and I admired what they'd done. So I was with ForgeRock for a little over 9 years.
So what did you enter in as? What was your role when you first started with them?
I joined the office of the CTO. So I was an individual contributor, and I was primarily focused, I would say, on the sort of privacy and consent and the future of permissioning and authorization aspects,
Mhm.
but really did a whole bunch of things, kind of emerging tech, senior leader of thought leadership around all that kind of emerging tech. And I helped the product side implement user managed access, which was one of my standards. So UMA is built on top of OAuth. It's kind of an application of OAuth. So those were some things I did during that time. And so ultimately, the original CTO of ForgeRock, Lasse Andersen, he decided he wanted to be a serial entrepreneur. He was one of the 5 founders of ForgeRock, and he went and founded IndyKite, which is a really interesting company.
Yes.
And so I was able to ascend, I guess, to the position of CTO, which for us meant really running the innovation labs. So
Yeah.
I just sort of continued in that track and really had an amazing run with some amazing folks on top of amazing technology.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I actually met with the IndyKite people at Identiverse over the summer. I've been following them for a little over a year now, because they do a lot of kind of the blockchain talk, AI talk with around identity, and I'm a big fan in both of those worlds. So I think they're the only other identity company that I know of that's really diving into blockchain development, AI development with the identity as its kind of its foundational landscape.
Yeah, it's an exciting time, and they've got a lot of these neat things. You guys concentrate a lot on Web3, and they are right there. Also, graph technology, which is something that our team, back in the day, started working on pretty early around what we called identity relationship management. I really think as we've started to sediment some good solutions around authentication, single sign-on, the next frontier is kind of multi-identity relationships, and the primary use case is authorization. And so, I can see that being done there as well, and that's another big passion of mine.
Yep. So then you moved up even further. Then you was like the interim CTO, and then just became full-fledged one day. How'd that happen?
Testing me out. Fran Roche had come in, and he was a really great leader for ForgeRock, and he was like, I'll let you try it out. I'll kick the tires on you, and ultimately, so I served as CTO. I guess full CTO for about 3 years, three and a quarter years, something like that. And it was a great opportunity to work with, fantastic leadership team. And, ForgeRock was really growing, and we were able to really grab for doing some interesting new things. And so here I am talking to you as an ex-ForgeRocker, very much invested in all of my former colleagues, the ForgeRockers, the Ping Identians, and, now from the outside, I'm watching them all work it out, and I think it'll be exciting.
So I would say you spent a majority of your career, obviously very successfully, planning and kind of guiding into what the future of identity is going to be, and not just from the hey, what would be fun, but more like, hey, look, this is what's needed. Here's realistically where it's going to go. So and you did a lot of that with ForgeRock too, I would imagine. So where do you see now, like 3 to 5 years, what are going to be the main areas that large enterprises should be focusing on? Like, what's to come for them that you see?
There's really 2 tracks to that, I would say. One of them really is this decentralized identity. Some people will say self-sovereign identity, which I think is a little bit more fraught as a term. But I started 8-9 years ago. I was a skeptic of that model. Did some work like at Kantara Initiative with a bunch of folks analyzing what we call the blockchain and smart contracts discussion group, and we produced this huge report. My co-chair and I, Thomas Harjono, where we were like, okay, if you apply all this technology to identity and privacy, where are the pitfalls? Where are the opportunities? Where are we sort of not thinking clearly yet? And that was back in, 2016 or so. Wow. Fast forward to today, and the EU is basically mandating this notion of wallets, identity wallets in a digital form, akin to the payment wallets that we're getting familiar with. And I think that we're now at a point where something will happen. There's a lot of activity in the space. A lot of it is not overtly connected to Web3, which is interesting, but there are a few players, like you're mentioning, that are sort of making the connection to that world as well. And I do think that model, which flips the traditional IAM stack on its head,
absolutely,
it can be done if we do it with eyes open and we're clear about not making things worse about the things we want to make better. Like, okay, now you're talking about verifiable credentials.
Yeah.
So high quality data about all these data subjects. Yes, they can carry it around. Yes, they can share it on their own kind of recognizance. But now, how is it being stored? How's it being managed? How's it being injected into the center of an organization? So that's one thing that I think must be paid attention to.
Yeah.
Second thing, there's actually some news coming from the Internet Identity Workshop number 37 that I just came back from in Mountain View. What a week. The second kind of path that I think is really important to pay attention to is, now that we are, we've got our hands around this notion of outsourcing authentication, achieving cross-domain single sign-on, achieving federation in some ways. But this notion of authorization, how do you externalize authorization, is now being worked on in a way that just sort of gladdens my heart, because I've been working on it since 2008 and I really care about it. And it's necessary, and it needs to ride on that other stuff that went before.
So how do you see authorization working with decentralized IDs?
Well, so, okay, let's talk about, let's zoom 100,000 feet out from IAM. It's not just authentication and authorization, it's signals and it's decisioning. There's whole bunches of new ways in which we need to do better, finer grained decisioning. Most of the time we're doing it for authorization, but sort of the dirty little secret around SIAM is that you also need to have a great experience, and there are decisions to be made about that. Upsell and all the rest of it. Let's be honest that identity has kind of become the cardiovascular system of the connected world. And so there's this new group that's forming at the OpenID Foundation, where OpenID Connect is managed, and things like the financial, what was called the financial grade API spec is managed. And the group is called AuthZen. And so there was kind of a, kickoff meeting of this group to be talking about, okay, how do we have a modern, scalable, automatable view that makes app devs happy and makes CISOs happy and actually enables kind of launching forward and externalizing authorization in this way that actually the zero trust architecture has right in its picture. So that's, I think, a really important thing to keep an eye on, because the more we do that, the better we can get to zero standing privilege. Yeah.
And essentially, there's actually a new blockchain that just came out in DomainNet that's focused purely on zero trust. So, or not zero trust, but zero knowledge proofs. So every transaction is using zero knowledge proofs to vet all the data to keep everything as anonymous and confidential as possible. So obviously there's a ton of overhead from the computational side, so we'll see how it actually works out. But I think zero knowledge proofs is a whole new world that is also helping a lot of people out. So, because right now it's like we have data leaks like crazy. We're like PII is getting out there, social security numbers getting out there, and it's like, why does anyone have a social security number on a third-party system? Like, we should be using zero knowledge proofs so we can say, yes, you validate that this person has that SSN, but I don't actually know what that SSN is. Have you looked into like zero knowledge proof stuff at all within, like, while you're at ForgeRock at all, or just more for fun?
Yeah, I mean, there's a really live conversation around the right way to build in, I would say the general category is selective disclosure into this new world of, the digital identity wallets and the credentials. And there are some standards that enable that. The conversation that was being had this week was a raucous, awesome, knockdown, drag out a little bit around whether selective disclosure will get the privacy effects people think because of the ability of re-identification from de-identified data. And I think we really have to have that, like the security folks need to have that conversation with their marketing folks, right? Like the folks who use ad tech and marketing automation. That said, within the security construct, I think that there's starting to be more tools, and even the computation is getting cheaper. And there's alternatives to sort of true zero knowledge proofs that, get interesting. It's getting cheaper and easier and more frictionless to do a good job of data hygiene. Like, we're finally paying attention to that kind of data plane that is involved in doing the jobs that identity helps you do. And so, I'm an optimistic person, kind of a Pollyanna, so I'm going to be hopeful about that. And, you know, if we can just get people to not somehow be interested in sharing all their information with services so that they can get great personalized service.
Free stuff. Yeah.
We'll be golden.
So, so last thing with like decentralized ID, a lot of companies are coming out with products where they have like, oh, look, we have decentralized ID, like Ping, you know, they have their Neo stuff. There's one Cosmos, decentralized, Microsoft Entra, they're decentralized ID. Do you feel that that is truly decentralized ID?
I don't think we're there yet, honestly. We haven't fully had that conversation about how credentials really interact with directories and other, you know, repositories, and what the persistence is of all that stuff. And that's why I think about it in terms of, okay, you're a verifier in the terms of decentralized identity, and you're kind of a relying party, we would say, in sort of traditional federated identity. So you want to ingest, you want to consume a credential that's high quality. How are you handling it? What are you doing with it? Are you storing it? Do you have any of that revocation infrastructure that's built into some of the standards to be able to handle, you know, no longer having it? Are you acting in good faith when you do all these things? How robust is your implementation? And then if you're an issuer, you know, do you feel that you're authoritative versus that credential that can now travel around with the person that it's about in terms of storing that information? You know, are enough issuers of enough credentials going to be motivated not to have their own copy to make good on somebody going, well, I lost my phone. You know, now we're going to have all those problems of, you know, that we talk about with passkeys and you know, FIDO and, you know, modern 2FA. That's going to be doubled, tripled, you know, 10x'd in the world where you're carrying around all your data. How do you recover from that? And so if issuers just want to store that information, they're the same honeypots they were before. So yeah, I don't think we've seen the end of that movie yet, but you know, I hope to contribute to how the movie ends. So hopefully,
when if you had to talk to like all the CISOs out in the world and about identity, what would you say would be like the top risks that are out there that they're really not paying attention to or giving enough focus on, that is kind of really should be, you know, they really need to be start putting that attention into?
Risks that identity is making worse, or risks around identity infrastructure?
I'll take either. I love the way you're talking about how identity can make it worse, because no one wants to have that conversation.
No one really does.
Every vendor is like, our product is perfect, we're not introducing any additional risk. I disagree. Okay, how about this? You're free from everything. So what do you think identity management systems, what risks are they introducing into the ecosystem that by putting these things in place?
Well, I mean, they're honeypots for data the way we're doing them now, right? And so they're honeypots for credentials in the traditional sense of, you know, lots of usernames and passwords. And despite all efforts to make usernames kind of, you know, another flavor of secret, that doesn't work very well. So that's all effectively public data. So the breach risk of that information lying around, particularly poorly secured. I mean, you know, salt your hashes, people, all that other good advice. And then specifically, there's the ability for new modernized identity to fix that. So, you know, when I was at ForgeRock, I was the executive sponsor of our series of identity breach reports, which we did annually for 5 years. And, you know, we were seeing some interesting numbers where, you know, there's a few little green shoots of a few little things that are improving, but things like supply chain risk are just, you know, through the roof now. And, you know, it kind of all has to start with the management of the credentials and the choice of the credentials. And this is where, you know, also once a skeptic about passwordless, you know, I think that we're starting to see practical passwordless have the same kinds of effects as practical biometric unlock on phones. You know, by weight, you have fewer phones that are lying around never locked because it's so easy to unlock them. So I think that we're starting to see that with pass keys in places like e-commerce, where they're building on top of embedded finance. That's a really interesting use case. I was predicting last year, that's the first place we're going to see it take off, because, you know, the first time I approach some, you know, retail site and want to interact with them, if they don't make me choose a password in that first interaction where I want to buy something with them, they have lost their window to ask for a password ever, pretty much now. People are very demanding, and like I'm so
Yeah,
excited that services like Shopify have they accept passkeys, and you know that lets me be unleashed as a consumer on the internet.
that's all. So are you a big fan of YubiKeys, or what do you use for your FIDO? What do you use for your keys personally? If you
I've
want to
been
tell us,
sort
I
of
don't know,
switching
maybe you
to
don't.
the software world. I mean, I love Yubico as a company, and I think there's a place for those hard tokens. Actually,
Mhm.
I am not. Am I currently using any hardware bound tokens? I don't think I am. Um, but well, I'm also sort of recently unemployed, so I'm refactoring all of my own personal IT, which is exciting. Like I'm finding all the end-to-end encrypted services that are out there that are alternatives for whatever.
Yeah.
So.
So now you pretty much write your own ticket and go wherever you want. What do you want to be doing in the next 5 years? Like what's interests you as like at the foundational level?
I have been having a lot of great conversations with folks and just sort of helping out with a lot of smaller companies. And, one of the great pleasures I had as a Forresterite was helping our clients, buy side or sell side, whatever, with their strategies, and with their strategies that intersect with identity, with security, with privacy, with experience, really. And so, a big part of me wants to be able to do more of that. So I kind of don't know how how I'm going to write the end of the story. Figure I'll get to 2024 and see what's what. But that really excites me, is enabling people to understand the latest stuff that's going to impact them, that should impact them, because it can be rocket fuel for their own strategies.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have this nickname in the community, the Queen of Venn. I like to make Venn diagrams. There's almost nothing you can't put into a Venn diagram. Forget that whole 2x2 matrix thing from Harvard. Like, so if I can help people create the right Venns and understand the right opportunities and the right intersections, then I'd be a happy camper.
Nice. Awesome. So you mentioned right before this about passwordless. You feel like it's finally getting its grips into being usable.
Yes.
Can you kind of elaborate on that and where you see it's going? Because like what I was just in Lisbon a little while ago, and that's when I found out Europe doesn't even know what passwordless is, let alone start using it yet, which is bizarre to me.
Yeah. There may even be a leapfrogging, because Europe is pushing the identity wallet conversation. And
And I think that's going to get rid of passwords altogether.
yeah, I mean, honestly, I think next gen passwordless is probably going to be, here's my prediction. I'll give you a prediction for, I don't know, over the next, 18 to 24 months. And I could see sort of some
Yeah.
of the green shoots of that in the conversations this week at IIW. FIDO has a model that, if you squint, looks an awful lot like this identity wallet model. It's
Mhm.
just, incomplete from the perspective of the verifiable credentials. No disrespect intended to FIDO. And then you look at the wallet world, which is facing these questions about, okay, the new soft target is going to be wallet security, and how do we actually do a good job of all of that? So
Yeah.
I think they're going to be rapidly learning from each other, and the nascent successes of FIDO are going to start to pull along the ability for walletized applications to do a good job around the verifiable credentials piece, inflected by what we've learned from this first really successful wave of FIDO stuff. So I think the EU has got this digital identity initiative where there's a number of wallet pilot projects, and the standards are still a little squishy. There's a very
Yeah.
complicated, I don't know, it's not a stack. I'm thinking more of like silly sand is what the stack of standards looks like when it comes
Mhm.
to the wallets. But I can see them start to be inflected by FIDO lessons learned. And that's how I think maybe Europe will leapfrog, actually, because
Yeah.
passwordless is the first use case that people try with an identity wallet anyway.
Yep. Have you played with a Web3 wallet at all? Like recently with like how the Web3 apps that are out there for interaction?
Not super recently, but we were advising some customers on kind of like, you've picked this Web3 wallet, and we want to see you actually not just think of it as helping you with authentication, but broadening the picture to include the identity wallet side of things. So as to take a kind of
What does
a
that mean?
more,
What is the identity wallet?
well, I mean, you can see a little bit in Apple and Google wallets around the mobile driver's license, the MDL
Okay.
credentials. And that is, and there's a lot of identity wallets kind of on offer. So many, it's almost incredible. they're different in the main from Web3 wallets because their main job in life is to let you serve out credentials about you versus payment mechanisms and, you know, participate in exchanges and stuff. So you're getting different things out of both of those paradigms. We're probably going to see them align more in the same hunk of application software, because I think that they sort of have common cause.
Yeah. Okay, cool. One other thing because I've been dying to ask someone at ForgeRock this, so I think I finally have the opportunity. So ForgeRock, I feel, has really done the best with AI integration with identity. I haven't seen anyone come close. I've seen them use the buzzword, but when I ask them, I was like, hey, how are you training your models, whatever, all of a sudden I get, well, and I'm like, yeah, it's algo. That's not ML. Like, so, you know, there's a big difference. So how do you see AI interacting with identity, like currently, like what's the benefits for it and where do you see it kind of going?
Yeah. And, you know, I was very, you know, can I say impressed with what ForgeRock was doing with what it called the autonomous suite, right? And it's come actually a long way. So autonomous identity is the piece that looks at, you know, attributes, roles, entitlements, treats all that as a big data problem, which it is even for, you know, enterprises of modest size, and then has a kind of an impact on lifecycle management and IGA in terms of hygiene. And so that is fairly simple in its AI approach. The later thing that came out was autonomous access, and that's impacting the runtime journeys. And that is a lot more ML inflected. And that's really exciting. And, you know, my old pal, Peter Barker, who remains at, you know, what people are calling Ping Rock, the new larger Ping with lots of ForgeRock in it. He has been the biggest advocate of that kind of autonomous approach. And I know that, you know, a lot of work has been going into kind of that data plane. So I think, you know, the sky could be the limit with approaches like this, and it will really help what's now being called ITDR. You know, this is I think it's a Gartner term, which is kind of the identity security, the security of identity, not just sort of with identity, to get all prepositional about it. So I think that there's so much that can be done. It's not just about all the things that sort of roll easily off the tongue, like, you know, better anomaly detection. I think that there's a lot more that can be improved to democratize how you deploy an IAM solution, for example.
Yeah, one of my like, I wouldn't even say it's like a psychic guess, but like I think what Ping should be doing with the acquisition from ForgeRock is really leaning into that AI model that was built out, because and not just Ping, really, like Thoma Bravo's that secret pairing up on top, like Thoma, SailPoint, Ping, ForgeRock, all that data of governance, identity, authorization, authentication, real time from all of its clients being modeled. I mean, they have the largest, I can't think of anyone else, but they have the largest like identity data set to use real time with real clients and real enterprises to build out their machine learning. And I don't think anyone will be able to compare if they use it right. And with what comes out of that, I don't even know. I think it's sky's the limit at that point. They can come with some crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's a really good observation. And like at this point, we're doing what I think of as like the fantasy football of, you know, the current IAM world is like, you know, what would our architecture look like if we took all these pieces that they've got under their control? And you know, I'm now speaking as somebody who, you know, has no particular insight into what they're going to do. But, you know, I agree. I think there's opportunities there. And I think that it could really make the decision making out of that sing, because the signals are just insane that you could collect.
So I don't really have any more questions. That's all that I have up in my head. Is there anything that you want to talk about, or any questions that you may have, or any topics you want to bring up to tell the world, all millions of people that are going to watch this podcast?
Well, I'm just excited to know about this podcast, and I've just become a fan in record time, and I just want more people to know about it as well, because I think you're just poking at like all the right things, and you've got this great sensibility. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to engage. It's great.
Oh, this is awesome. I can't wait to meet in person. I'm so stoked. Are there any new conferences or anything that you plan on attending coming up in the next few months or so?
My plans are so, I was going to say squishy, fluid. My plans are very fluid right now, but you know, there's the tentpole ones that I wouldn't miss for the world. For sure, I plan to be at EIC next year in Berlin. That's not till June. That's a long time from now. So we'll see what happens. But I very much hope to meet you in 3D because 3D rocks.
Yes. I love Berlin. That's one of my favorite cities. So maybe I'll give me a great excuse to go out there.
There you go. It'll definitely be a good
Cool.
time.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks to everyone else watching in. If you have any questions, feel free to hit us up anytime on all of our streaming platforms. We're on LinkedIn and YouTube, Nidus IAM, Twitter, TikTok, all the fun things. We're going to have all the clips and all that kind of stuff up. Eve, thank you very much for joining me. I had a great time, and I can't wait to meet with you in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.